You got nothing, sis. Mom made sure of that. My brother Danny stood in our childhood kitchen, waving Mom's will like a victory flag, his grin so wide it looked painful. The funeral flowers were still fresh on the counter, and he was already measuring the house for renovations. Aunt Carol stood frozen in the doorway, holding a casserole dish, watching this scene unfold like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. 3 months later, those words still echo. But that day, watching my own brother celebrate our mother's death as his personal lottery win, I understood something Mom had been trying to teach me for years. She finally saw you for what you really are, he continued, leaning against the granite countertop Mom had saved 2 years to afford. A disappointment. Friend, before I tell you about the phone call that made Danny's victory lap the shortest celebration in family history, do me a kindness. Tap that subscribe button, because what happens next proves that patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. My name is Lisa Park, and this is the story of how I went from the sister who got nothing to the woman who owned everything, including the truth Danny thought he'd buried with Mom. I was 26 when Mom got her diagnosis. Lung cancer, aggressive, maybe 18 months if she was lucky. I quit my job the next day and moved back into my childhood bedroom. Danny was 31, married to Jennifer, and he kept his routine exactly the same. Doctor appointments and insurance calls became my world while he sent encouraging texts from his office. For 16 months, I was Mom's shadow while Danny made strategic visits, the ones with Mom's lawyer that I was too busy caring for her to notice. The day Mom died, Danny arrived 20 minutes after she was gone, cried real tears, then asked when we could meet about the will. Mom's attorney, Mr. Peterson, had known our family for 15 years. When he opened that leather folder and started reading, his face was carefully blank. To my son Daniel, I leave the house on Maple Street, my savings accounts, my investment portfolio, and my personal effects. Danny's knee bounced under the conference table. To my daughter Lisa, I leave my gratitude for her devotion, and the knowledge that love is its own reward. The air went out of the room. Everything stopped. My chest went tight and the words bounced around my skull without landing anywhere that made sense. That's it. I whispered. That's it, Danny said, but his voice carried something that wasn't quite relief. But what Danny didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that 20 minutes before Mom died, she'd squeezed my hand and whispered 5 words that would change everything. Phase 1 is complete, sweetheart. I didn't know what Phase 1 meant yet. But Danny was about to teach me, and that lesson would cost him everything he thought he'd won. You're so good with her, Lisa, Aunt Carol had said at Mom's birthday dinner, watching me cut Mom's food into smaller pieces. Danny's lucky he doesn't have to worry about any of this. Danny just smiled and refilled his wine glass. That's the thing about being the good daughter. Nobody questions your motives and nobody questions why your brother gets to stay clean. But here's what I remember most about those 16 months. Mom was scared, but she wasn't weak. Danny came by yesterday, she'd tell me over breakfast, spooning oatmeal she could barely taste. He had questions about the house insurance. What I didn't realize was that Danny's questions always happened on Tuesdays. Always during my physical therapy appointments with Mom. Always when I wasn't there to hear the answers. The pattern was surgical. Danny would visit with Jennifer and their new baby, make it feel like family time. But when I'd ask Mom about it later, she'd go quiet. He just wants to help, she'd say, but something in her voice suggested help wasn't exactly what she was getting. Then came the documents. Lisa, honey, could you witness my signature on something? Mom asked one Thursday evening. We were watching her favorite cooking show, the one where contestants made elaborate cakes she could never eat anymore. The papers were spread across her little TV table. Legal size, dense text, official letterhead. I was exhausted from a 12-hour day of insurance calls and medication schedules. Mom had been handling legal stuff my whole life. I signed where she pointed, my eyes burning from fatigue. What is this? Just updating some beneficiary information. Danny suggested it. But when I leaned over to hand her the pen, I caught something that made my stomach twist. At the bottom of the page in Danny's handwriting, per our conversation 3/15 time sensitive. Our conversation. Not Mom's conversation. Mom, did you ask him to prepare these papers? She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, sometimes the people we love make choices for us they think are best. The second warning came in month 14. Mom asked me to drive her to the bank to add me to her checking account. But when we sat down with the banker, something was wrong. Mrs. Park, it looks like there was a large withdrawal last month, the banker said. $47,000. I stared at the screen. The number didn't make sense. I looked at Mom's face. She'd gone white. The silence stretched until I could hear my own heartbeat. That's not possible, Mom whispered. Since when? I asked. According to our records, the withdrawal was authorized by your son Daniel. He's listed as power of attorney for financial matters. The paperwork was filed in March 15th. The same date written on those papers I'd witnessed. Mom looked truly afraid for the first time since her diagnosis. Not afraid of dying. Afraid of what was happening while she was still alive. That night, Mom sat me down at her kitchen table. There are things you don't know about your brother, she began. He told me about the phone calls. The visits when I wasn't there. The gentle suggestions that became persistent requests that became assumed permissions. Danny had been laying groundwork for months, convincing Mom she was too sick to handle her own decisions. But the scariest part, Mom said, is that he believes he's entitled to it. He's convinced himself this is what I want. So change it. Take away his power of attorney. Rewrite your will. Mom smiled, but it wasn't the smile I was used to. Her eyes went completely still. The frail woman disappeared, replaced by someone who'd been watching and planning while we all thought she was dying. Oh, sweetheart. Who says I haven't? Before I could ask what she meant, her phone rang. Danny's name flashed on the screen. Hi, honey, Mom answered, her voice instantly weaker, more fragile than it had been seconds before. Yes, I'm feeling tired today. She was performing, playing the role of the dying mother while my brother spoke in her ear. When Mom hung up, she looked at me with eyes that were anything but weak. Phase 2 starts tomorrow, Lisa. And you're going to help me teach your brother what happens when someone mistakes kindness for stupidity. But as I stared at my mother, one thought cut through everything else. If she'd been planning this whole time, if she'd been 3 steps ahead of Danny from the beginning, then what she'd let him take from her wasn't theft. It was bait. He wants to put me in a care facility. Mom said it like she was discussing the weather, but her eyes were watching my face carefully. Your brother called this morning. He's worried about you getting too involved in my affairs. I set down my coffee cup. He suggested I might be more comfortable somewhere with trained professionals. Somewhere that could handle my needs better than my daughter who dropped her whole life to be here. The words hit like a slap. I stared at Mom, waiting for her to say she told him to go to hell. She just kept watching me. You told him no. I told him I'd think about it. Her tone was flat, clinical. Because thinking gives us time, Lisa. Time to finish what we started. She reached into her robe pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Time for you to understand what Phase 2 really means. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Copies of emails between Danny and Jennifer dating back 8 months. Financial records showing transfers. And at the bottom, a letter addressed to me in Mom's handwriting. Read it out loud, she said. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the letter. My dearest Lisa, if you're reading this, then Danny has shown his true colors, and it's time for you to know what your mother really thinks about family loyalty. Your brother believes he's securing his inheritance. What he's actually doing is proving every suspicion I've had about his character. I looked up. Mom was watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, not maternal, not weak. Keep reading. Every withdrawal, every document, every conversation about my declining capacity has been documented. Danny thinks he's taking advantage of a sick old woman. He doesn't realize this sick old woman has been watching him reveal exactly who he is when he thinks no one's keeping score. Mom, what are you saying? She leaned forward. I'm saying your brother made a choice, Lisa. He chose to see my illness as his opportunity instead of his responsibility. And choices have consequences. But the will he read at Peterson's office was exactly what Danny expected to hear. What he demanded to hear. Mom's smile was sharp as glass. But Danny only gets what he thinks he's inherited if he can prove he deserves it. And Lisa, sweetheart, the way Danny's been behaving since my funeral tells me everything about what he deserves. What do you need me to do? That was the moment. The moment I stopped being Mom's caregiver and became her accomplice. I need you to disappear for a while, Mom said. Danny's getting suspicious. If he figures out I'm not as helpless as I'm pretending. Where would I go? Remember my sister Diane in Portland? Mom handed me a plane ticket. You leave tomorrow. You stay for exactly 2 weeks. And while you're gone, you let Danny think he's gotten rid of the only person who might interfere with his plans. What happens while I'm away? Mom's expression darkened. While you're away, your brother is going to do exactly what I expect him to do. He's going to move fast, make mistakes, and hand me everything I need. I stared at the plane ticket. Portland. 2 weeks. Missing what might be Mom's final days so she could set a trap for my brother. What if I came back to find her gone? What if these were our last conversations and I was choosing to waste them on Danny's destruction? What if something happens to you while I'm gone? Then you come back for my funeral and watch Danny learn that some games have consequences he never saw coming. The words hung in the air between us. Mom was asking me to trust her completely. To leave her alone and vulnerable while Danny made his moves. To bet everything on a plan that could backfire spectacularly. I picked up the ticket. What exactly am I supposed to tell Danny about why I'm leaving? Mom's smile was cold and certain. You're going to tell him that watching him celebrate my death broke your heart, and you need time away from family to heal. And then you're going to let him believe that when you come back, you'll be too devastated and defeated to fight him for anything. But as I packed my bags that night, one thought kept circling. If Mom's plan failed, if Danny was smarter than she thought, I'd come home to find everything gone and my mother's final weeks wasted on a gamble that destroyed us both. The plane left in 12 hours, and there was no way to know if I was walking into Mom's brilliant victory or our complete annihilation. I'd called Mom's house 3 times that morning. No answer. Portland felt like exile, but it was the silence from home that made it feel like abandonment. Danny finally called back on day 2. Lisa, thank God you're getting some space, he said, but there was something clipped in his tone, like he was checking items off a list. Mom told me you needed time to process everything. I've been calling the house. She's been sleeping a lot. The doctor came by yesterday, he's concerned about her eating. Danny's voice shifted to that tone he used for serious family business. I'm staying at the house now. Just until you get back. The speed of it hit me wrong. You moved in. Mom shouldn't be alone right now. Jennifer understands. Pause. Lisa, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you've done. When you come back, maybe we can work together on making her final weeks comfortable. Final weeks. Like he'd already scheduled her death. I should come home. No. Mom specifically said she wanted you to take the full 2 weeks. She feels guilty about how much you've sacrificed. Day 4 brought a text from Jennifer. Thinking of you. Danny says your mom is hanging in there. Take care of yourself, Red Heart. Day 6. Hope you're getting rest. Danny's handling everything so well. Day 8. Your mom seems much calmer with Danny managing things. You should focus on healing. Each message felt like Jennifer was slowly choosing sides. But it was the call from Mr. Peterson that made everything real. Lisa, I'm sorry to bother you while you're away, but I need to ask you something. His voice was tight. Has your mother mentioned anything about changing her will recently? I stopped breathing. The silence stretched until Peterson continued. Your brother came in yesterday with some questions about estate planning. He seemed to think your mother might want to make some adjustments. What kind of adjustments? He specifically asked about simplifying the beneficiary structure. Making things cleaner for when the time comes. Peterson paused. He also mentioned that you'd been under stress and might not be in the best position to handle responsibilities. The room spun. Danny wasn't just moving fast. He was moving ahead of schedule. Mr. Peterson, I need you to do something for me. Don't make any changes to any documents without speaking to my mother when she's alone. I'll handle this appropriately, Lisa. But you should know, your brother seemed very confident about what your mother wanted. Almost like he'd already had detailed conversations with her about it. That night I called Mom's house. Danny answered on the first ring. Oh, she's sleeping, he said, but I caught something, a slight edge, like he'd been waiting for my call. These pain medications really knock her out. But she's comfortable. Can you wake her? Just for a minute. Lisa, the doctor mentioned that disruptions might be bad for her sleep schedule. Maybe we could set up regular afternoon calls when her energy is better. Afternoon calls. When he'd be there to monitor every word. Danny, is she really okay? She's dying, Lisa. His voice was gentle, practiced. I know it's hard to accept from a distance, but she's declining faster than expected. The important thing is that she's not suffering. I want to come home. She asked me to remind you that you promised her 2 weeks. She said she'd be upset if you broke that promise. But as I hung up, I realized Danny had managed something impossible. He'd convinced me that Mom was simultaneously too confused to handle legal decisions and clear enough to make specific requests about my absence. The trap Mom had set was working perfectly. But sitting in that guest room, I couldn't shake the feeling that while I was watching my mother disappear one convenient lie at a time, Danny was 24 hours away from making those lies permanent. Because tomorrow, Peterson would either protect Mom's real wishes or cave to Danny's pressure. And if Peterson caved, everything Mom had planned would collapse before I could get home to stop it. Something was wrong. I could feel it in my chest, in the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking, in the silence from home that felt like a scream. I didn't sleep that night. At 3 a.m. Portland time, I was calculating if it was too late to call Peterson directly. At 6 a.m. I made the call anyway. "Mr. Peterson, this is Lisa Park. I need to know what happened in that meeting with my brother." "Lisa, His voice was strained. "I think you should come home." "What did Danny do?" "He brought documentation. Medical reports about your mother's cognitive decline. Signed statements from Jennifer about concerning behaviors she'd witnessed. And he brought your mother with him." The phone slipped in my hand. "What?" "Your mother came to the meeting, Lisa. She seemed frail, confused. She kept looking at Danny for answers to questions she should have known herself." "That's impossible." Mom was playing. "She signed new documents. A simplified will, updated power of attorney provisions and—" Peterson's voice dropped. "Lisa, she also signed papers committing herself to Danny's care. Legal guardianship documents." I couldn't breathe. The words bounced around my head without landing anywhere that made sense. Guardianship. That wasn't possible. Mom would never. She wouldn't do that. I advised against it. I told them to wait, to give you time to return and discuss this as a family. But your mother became very agitated. She said she didn't want to be a burden anymore. She said you'd already sacrificed too much. Where is she now? Danny moved her to Sunrise Manor yesterday afternoon. He said the house had become too difficult for her to manage. I was on a plane 4 hours later. Danny met me at the airport. His face was perfectly composed, grief mixed with relief, exhaustion mixed with determination. "Lisa, I'm so sorry you had to cut your trip short. I know Mom wanted you to have that time to heal, but her condition deteriorated so quickly." He paused, studying my face. "I hated having to make these decisions alone, but someone had to step up. Someone had to step up. Like I'd been absent by choice instead of following Mom's plan. I want to see her. Of course. She's been asking for you." Danny's hand touched my shoulder. "But I need to prepare you. She's not the same woman you left 2 weeks ago." The drive felt like a funeral procession. Danny filled the silence with updates delivered in careful clinical language. Mom's sleep schedule, her eating habits, her confusion about where she was. "The doctors think she had a series of small strokes," he said. "Nothing we could have prevented. Just a rapid decline." Mom was in room 237, sitting in a chair by the window staring at nothing. She looked smaller than I remembered. When she turned toward us, her eyes took too long to focus. "Lisa." Her voice was uncertain. "When did you get back from your trip?" "Just now, Mom." "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Everything makes me tired." She looked at Danny. "Daniel's been taking care of everything. Such a good boy." Then, quieter, almost like she was remembering something, "Phase 2 was always the hardest part." Danny's head snapped toward her. "What did you say, Mom?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Just thinking out loud." Her voice went flat again. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I stared at Mom. "Phase 2. She'd said it so casually, like muscle memory. "Mom, do you remember what we talked about before I left? About Danny and the will and—" "The will." She looked confused. "Daniel explained it all to me. Everything goes to him because he's the responsible one." "I think she needs to rest," Danny said quickly. "These visits can be overstimulating." As we walked back to the car, Danny continued his performance. "The doctors say this is the new normal. But Lisa, there's something else we need to discuss. The house. What about it?" Mom's care costs almost $4,000 a month. We need to sell the house to cover her expenses. I've already scheduled the realtor for Thursday. Thursday. 2 days away. You want to sell Mom's house? I don't want to. Have to. Unless you have $48,000 a year lying around. That night I called lawyers who handled elder abuse cases. Without evidence of coercion or fraud, there's not much we can do, the third lawyer told me. If your mother signed these documents willingly. What if I told you my mother was pretending? That this was all planned? Do you have proof of that? What proof did I have? A letter. Conversations. A plan that sounded crazy even to me. After I hung up, I sat in the dark trying to make sense of what had happened. Either Mom's plan had failed completely, or Danny had discovered what she was doing and used her own trap against her. But there was a third possibility that made my blood run cold. What if there had never been a plan at all? What if I'd been so desperate to believe my mother was still sharp and strong that I'd invented an entire conspiracy rather than face the truth? The realtor would come Thursday morning to list the house where I'd grown up. And sitting alone in my apartment, I couldn't escape the crushing fear that while I'd been in Portland playing along with what I thought was Mom's brilliant strategy, I'd actually abandoned her in her most vulnerable moment to the brother who'd been waiting for exactly that chance. Thursday morning came like an execution date. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, staring at Mom's house across the street. I could smell her lilac perfume in my memory, could hear Dad's voice calling us in for dinner from this same driveway. I sat in my car watching strangers walk through her front door. The realtor, a woman in a sharp blazer, pointed at features like she was cataloging inventory. Young couples nodded and took notes about square footage and renovation potential. Danny stood on the porch, playing the role of the reluctant son forced to sell his childhood home for his mother's medical care. I'd called him that morning to ask if I could be there. Lisa, I don't think that's a good idea. This is emotional enough without. He paused. Mom specifically asked me not to involve you in the financial decisions. She doesn't want you carrying that burden too. That burden too. Like caring for her had already been more weight than I could handle. By noon there were 3 offers. Danny called me that evening. Good news, we got asking price. The buyers want to close fast, so we should have the money for Mom's care within 2 weeks. What about Mom's things? Her photos, Dad's books, her jewelry. I've packed up the important stuff. Jennifer and I will store it until we figure out what to do long term. I want to go through it with you. Of course. When things settle down. His voice carried that patient tone he used for unreasonable requests. Right now, the priority is making sure Mom has everything she needs. The next week, I visited Mom every day. Each visit felt like watching someone disappear in slow motion. She remembered my name but not why I was visiting so often. The house is sold, I told her on Wednesday. What house? Your house, Mom. The one on Maple Street where you raised us. She looked confused. I thought Daniel owned that house. No, Mom. It was yours. Oh. He stared out the window. Well, Daniel knows what's best. Friday brought the final blow. I arrived at Sunrise Manor to find Mom's room empty. A nurse was packing medical supplies. Where is Mrs. Park? Her son moved her to the memory care unit this morning. Room 108. Memory care. The locked ward. I found Mom in a smaller room with no personal belongings except a single photo of her and Dad. He was sitting in a wheelchair staring at nothing. Mom. She turned toward my voice but her eyes didn't focus. Are you here to help me? I can't find my room. This is your room, Mom. No, my room has my quilt. The one my mother made. Her voice was thin, lost. Then, quietly, like she was trying to remember something important. Lisa? Just my name. But she'd said it like a question and an answer at the same time. Danny appeared in the doorway. Lisa, what are you doing here? Visiting hours for memory care are different. Why didn't you tell me you were moving her? It happened fast. She had an incident Tuesday night. The doctor said she needs more supervision. She seems worse. The transition is hard. But this is the right place for her now. Danny's voice was gentle, final. Lisa, you need to accept what's happening. Mom is gone. Not dead, but the person she was doesn't exist anymore. That night, I sat on my apartment floor with all the evidence I thought I had. I pulled out the emails between Danny and Jennifer. When I read them carefully, they were about concern for Mom's health, not schemes to steal her money. Danny worried about her driving. Jennifer mentioned Mom forgetting conversations. The financial records showed Danny had been helping with Mom's bills for months before I moved in. Not stealing from her, supporting her. Mom's letter, when I read it with clear eyes, sounded like the confused rambling of someone who'd been watching too many legal dramas. The handwriting was shakier than I'd wanted to admit. The logic jumped from thought to thought without clear connections. I'd built an entire conspiracy out of an old woman's paranoid fears. I'd abandoned my dying mother on her kitchen table, promising to help her outsmart Danny, when what she'd really needed was someone to help her accept that she was losing her mind. I could see it now, that last morning before Portland, Mom sitting alone after I left, trying to remember what we'd talked about, why I was leaving, what plan we'd made. And when Danny arrived to check on her, finding her confused and frightened, not sharp and scheming. While I was in Portland feeling clever about our secret strategy, Mom was probably calling out for me, not understanding why I'd suddenly disappeared when she needed me most. But as I sat there in the ruins of everything I'd believed, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Lisa, this is Diane Peterson, Robert's wife. We need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow at 2 p.m.? There are things about your mother's case that Robert couldn't tell you professionally. Coffee shop on 5th and Main." And for the first time in weeks, my heart started beating like there might still be something worth fighting for. The coffee shop on 5th and Main was nearly empty at 2 p.m. I spotted Diane Peterson immediately, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and worried eyes, sitting in the corner booth with 2 cups already on the table. "Lisa." She stood as I approached. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Mrs. Peterson, if this is about your husband's legal advice." "Call me Diane. And this isn't about Robert's legal advice. This is about what he couldn't tell you because of attorney-client privilege." She slid a manila envelope across the table. "Your mother asked me to give this to you if anything happened to her." My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter in Mom's handwriting, not the shaky script I'd remembered, but her clear, firm writing from before she got sick. "Diane, if you're reading this to Lisa, then Daniel has moved faster than I expected, and I need her to know the truth." I looked up. Diane was watching me with sad, knowing eyes. The coffee shop tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of the table as my vision tunneled. "Keep reading. I am not losing my mind, though I've been pretending to be for Daniel's benefit. Every confused moment, every blank stare, every time I let him think I don't understand, it's all performance. I've been documenting everything he's done, but I needed him to feel safe enough to reveal his true intentions." The words blurred. When was this written? 3 weeks before she died. He was completely lucid, Lisa. Angry but lucid. Diane leaned forward. "Your mother knew Danny was manipulating her finances. But she also knew that if she confronted him directly, he'd just become more careful. So the guardianship papers, the care facility, were not her choice. But she anticipated them." Diane pulled out her phone and showed me a voice recording. "She made this the day you left for Portland." I pressed play. Mom's voice came through clear and strong. "This is Eleanor Park and I am of sound mind and body. Today is the 15th of October. My son Daniel thinks I am declining mentally, but I am not. I have been allowing him to believe I am confused so that he will reveal his plans. My daughter Lisa is following my instructions to be absent. I know this sounds paranoid, but Daniel has been systematically isolating me and I have proof." The recording continued. Mom describing Danny's visits, his pressure tactics, but her voice carrying an edge of anger that defense lawyers could easily frame as instability. "Diane, why didn't your husband use this? Because your mother made us promise not to unless Danny went too far. She wanted to give him one last chance." Diane's voice was heavy. She thought if he could see what complete control felt like, maybe he'd realize he didn't want that responsibility. But she seems so confused now. When I visit her, she barely knows where she is. "Lisa, your mother has been on heavy sedatives since Danny gained guardianship. The medical records show a dramatic increase in her medications." Diane's voice was tight with anger. The dosages she's receiving would make anyone appear confused. The room spun. He's drugging her? All those visits where I'd watched Mom struggle to focus, where I'd felt sick watching her fade away, she'd been fighting through a pharmaceutical fog, trying to reach me while I stood there convinced she was gone. I'd abandoned her twice. Once in Portland and again when I believed she'd really lost her mind. The medications are prescribed for her safety and comfort. But this is a copy of your mother's medical directive from 6 months ago. She specifically refused psychiatric medications except in extreme cases. What do I do? How do I stop this? That's the impossible choice, Lisa. If you fight this, you'll have to prove that Danny manipulated medical professionals. You'll be going up against his legal guardianship with evidence that could be dismissed as paranoid ravings. Diane's voice softened. And if you lose, you'll be seen as someone who exploited a sick parent for money. You could lose any chance of seeing her again. Danny could argue you're a danger to her well-being. But she's still alive. She's still in there. Yes. But fighting could take months. You'd be risking everything: your reputation, your relationship with your family, your mother's peace in her final days, on recordings and letters that defense attorneys will tear apart. I looked down at Mom's letter one more time. At the bottom she'd written, "Lisa, if you're reading this, you have a choice to make. You can let him win because fighting is hard and uncertain, or you can show him that underestimating both the women in this family was the biggest mistake of his life. Diane, will your husband help me? Officially, he can't. But Robert has been hoping someone would ask the right questions for weeks." I stood up, Mom's letter clutched in my hand. Then I guess it's time to ask the right questions. Lisa, wait. Danny is scheduled to meet with the care facility's financial planner tomorrow afternoon. He's making arrangements that will require liquidating all of your mother's remaining assets. How long do I have? If he signs those papers tomorrow, everything becomes much harder to undo. But if someone were to request a competency evaluation for your mother before then? Diane handed me a business card. Dr. Rebecca Shaw, independent psychiatric evaluator. She's available for emergency evaluations. Today. As I walked out of that coffee shop, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. My mother's voice in my head, clear and strong and absolutely certain. Danny thought he'd won by isolating Mom and making me doubt everything I'd believed. But he'd made one critical error. He'd assumed that when the women in our family went quiet, it meant we'd given up. Tomorrow he was about to learn the difference between silence and strategy. Dr. Rebecca Shaw met me at Sunrise Manor at 4 p.m. with a briefcase full of evaluation tools and a court order for an emergency competency assessment. "Mrs. Park, I'm Dr. Shaw. I'm here to do some simple tests to make sure you're getting the right level of care." Mom was in her wheelchair in the day room, staring at a television she wasn't watching. When Dr. Shaw said her name, Mom's eyes took too long to focus. "I'm tired," Mom said. "They give me pills that make everything fuzzy." Dr. Shaw looked at Mom's chart, then at me. "Mrs. Park, when was the last time you had these medications?" "This morning. 2 blue ones and a white one. They said it would help me sleep, but I don't want to sleep all the time. What if we waited until those medications were off before we do our test? Would that be okay?" For the first time in weeks, Mom's eyes sharpened slightly. "You mean I can think clearly? Let's see what happens." 3 hours later, as the sedatives left Mom's system, she began to emerge. Like watching someone surface from deep water, gasping for air they hadn't realized they'd been missing. By 8 p.m. Mom was sitting up straight, asking coherent questions. "Lisa." Her voice was still weak but clearer. "How long have I been foggy?" 2 weeks, Mom. Since Danny moved you here." "Danny." She paused, looking confused for a moment. "What month is it?" "October." When I nodded, she continued. "Is he still planning to steal everything?" Dr. Shaw looked up from her notes. "Mrs. Park, you understand where you are and why? I'm in a locked ward because my son convinced everyone I'm losing my mind. But I'm not." Mom rubbed her temples. The medications make it hard to remember things clearly." Dr. Shaw finished her evaluation at 9 p.m. "Mrs. Park shows no signs of cognitive decline when not under the influence of sedative medications. She's oriented, logical, and capable of making decisions." My phone rang at 9:30. "Vinny." "Lisa, where are you?" "The nursing staff said you've been here all day." "We were in Mom's room." "I'm with Mom. She needs her evening medications. You can't interfere with her medical care." "Actually, Danny, I can." Dr. Shaw just completed an emergency competency evaluation. Mom is completely lucid when she's not sedated. Silence. "Then, that's impossible," the doctor said. The doctors said what you told them she needed. Mom's voice was weak but steady. Hello, Daniel. Mom? You sound. How are you feeling? I'm feeling like my son has been drugging me and stealing from me for months. Her voice got stronger. I'm feeling like I've been pretending to be confused so you'd show me exactly who you really are. Mom, you're not making sense. You're sick. I needed help, Daniel. I needed my son to love me enough to take care of me without taking everything I worked for. Mom struggled to sit up straighter. Instead, I got a son who saw my illness as his opportunity. I don't know what Lisa has told you, but Lisa didn't tell me anything. I told her. Mom reached for my hand. Lisa, play him the recording. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Mom's voice from weeks earlier, clear and sharp, documenting Danny's manipulation. When it finished, the silence stretched. This is insane. His voice was different now. Desperate. That recording could be from anywhere. Lisa could have coached you to say those things. You can't possibly have been pretending this whole time. Because I let you watch me forget things. Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. Mom was fully alert now. And you went further than I imagined. I was protecting you. From what? From making stupid decisions. From giving everything away to people who don't deserve it. Danny's voice cracked. You were going to leave everything to Lisa just because she moved back home. That's not fair. There was the truth behind all his concern and responsibility. So you decided to take it instead? I decided to make sure our family's money stayed in our family. Daniel, you haven't been part of this family since the day you saw my illness as your inheritance opportunity. Mom, please. We can fix this. Tomorrow morning, when Dr. Shaw files her report and the court reviews your guardianship, you're going to explain to a judge why you sedated a competent woman against her medical directives. I heard something crash on Danny's end. This is crazy. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I said, we can. The recordings, the medical directives you overrode, the financial transactions. And Daniel, there's one more thing. Mr. Peterson has been documenting irregularities in your handling of Mom's affairs since your first visit to his office. The line went dead. Mom squeezed my hand. How long do you think it will take him to realize he can't undo what he's already done? What do you mean? The house sale, the liquidated accounts, the guardianship papers, all done while he thought I was incompetent. Now that we can prove I wasn't, every transaction becomes questionable. I stared at my mother. You planned for this exact scenario. I planned for my son to reveal exactly who he was when he thought no one was keeping score. Mom's smile was sharp. Tomorrow, when the courts reverse his guardianship and review his financial transactions, Daniel is going to learn that underestimating a dying woman was the most expensive mistake of his life. But as we sat there in that sterile room, both of us finally free to speak the truth, I couldn't shake the feeling that the complete silence from Danny's end meant he was already planning something desperate. The emergency court hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. the next morning. Danny arrived with 2 lawyers and Jennifer, who looked like she hadn't slept. He'd clearly spent the night trying to build a defense. But when Dr. Shaw presented her evaluation and the judge heard the recordings of Mom's voice, clear, rational, and strategic, the emergency suspension of guardianship was granted immediately. Mr. Park, Judge Morrison said, her voice cutting through the courtroom, you obtained legal guardianship over a woman who was demonstrably competent by having her heavily medicated to appear incapacitated. That's not health care. That's imprisonment. This guardianship is suspended pending full review, and all financial transactions are under immediate investigation. Danny stood frozen as the judge continued. You have 72 hours to provide complete accounting for every asset you've liquidated or transferred. I watched my brother's face crumble as he realized the house sale, the account closures, even Mom's care facility payments. Everything he'd done thinking he was finally in control was now evidence of financial exploitation. Dr. Shaw worked through the night to design a medication reduction plan. By that evening, Mom was sitting up in bed, demanding to know why her belongings were in storage instead of her room. Where's my quilt? The one my mother made. Danny put it in storage when he moved you to memory care. Well, get it back. I'm not staying in this place another night without my things. Took 3 weeks, but we got everything back. The legal fees nearly wiped out my savings, and the stress of fighting Danny's lawyers took a visible toll on Mom's energy. but the house sale was voided when the buyers learned it had been conducted under fraudulent guardianship. Danny was forced to return every penny plus penalties. Mom moved back to Maple Street 2 days after the house was returned to her name. I helped her arrange her furniture exactly the way she wanted it. You know what the strangest part was? Mom said one evening as we sat in her kitchen, drinking tea like none of the nightmare had ever happened. What? I really did start getting confused sometimes. Being on those medications, pretending to be lost. After a while, the line between acting and reality got blurry. She looked at me with eyes that were completely clear now. But I learned that even when I wasn't sure who I was anymore, I still knew who I wasn't willing to become. Danny's trial was set for 6 months later. Jennifer filed for divorce, taking their daughter. The last time I saw him, he was signing papers to dissolve the trust fund he'd tried to claim. Lisa, I need you to know I really thought I was protecting the family, he said as we left the lawyer's office. Danny, you were protecting yourself. There's a difference. Maybe. But I still think you never understood how hard it was to watch you get credit for caring when I was the one making the difficult financial decisions. I looked at my brother one last time. Love isn't measured in spreadsheets, Danny. It's measured in showing up when showing up is hard. That was the last conversation we ever had. Mom lived another 2 years. 24 good months where she was sharp, engaged, and completely in control. She updated her will, leaving the house to me and setting up a trust for Danny's daughter that he couldn't access until she turned 25. She died peacefully in her sleep on a Tuesday morning in spring, surrounded by flowers from her garden and pictures of people who'd loved her for who she was, not what she owned. At her funeral, Danny sat in the back with a woman I didn't recognize. He didn't speak, didn't approach me. But as people were leaving, he walked up to Mom's casket and whispered something I couldn't hear. Later, the funeral director told me he'd said, "I'm sorry I never learned to love you the way Lisa did." I still live in Mom's house on Maple Street. I've converted her bedroom into an office where I work as a freelance paralegal, helping families navigate elder law and guardianship issues. It's work that protects people like Mom from people like Danny. Sometimes I get calls from adult children convinced their siblings are manipulating their parents. I listen, help them document concerns, connect them with resources. But I also tell them something I learned the hard way. Sometimes the person you're trying to protect is stronger and smarter than you realize. Sometimes your job isn't to save them. It's to trust them enough to let them save themselves. And sometimes when you think someone you love is disappearing, they're actually just waiting for you to stop talking long enough to hear what they've been trying to tell you all along. Friend, thank you for staying with me to the very end. If you believe that strength isn't about how you fall, but how you get back up, and that family means protecting each other instead of protecting yourself from each other, then please subscribe and join our community. You won't want to miss the stories we share next. I've got more stories that will move you, and I promise each one is worth your time. I've picked out another story just for you, and you should see it on the screen now. I hope to see you there.